everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. Today we are talking about Secure Rural Schools. It is a federal program that provides subsidies to counties closely tied to the U.S. forests, mostly here in the West. It is funding that is in question once again, and it does have impacts not only on the directly affected counties, but all of the surrounding rural counties in the state. We'll explain that all in the course of the show. Right now, we're going to start with a story to bring you up to speed on what SRS is, how it came to be, and how it functions.
Summer is here again, and school is out for the kids. But for rural county commissioners, the work of making those school bells ring next fall is just beginning. The fight for funding is centered around the Secure Rural Schools Act, or SRS, which provides counties with federal subsidies to compensate for revenue lost over logging, which was curtailed back in 1983 and 1994. To understand SRS, it's best to know the history behind it. In 1907, the U.S. Forest Service was established, and in 1908, Congress enacted rules requiring 25% of the royalties derived from timber sales to be paid to the state for the county's use. 30 years later, a new law was passed that required 75% of revenues derived from Forest Service receipts to be paid to the counties in which the land is situated. Half of that money was required to be used for the other county funds, such as schools. After decades using this funding to support their counties, the federal government barred significant logging allowed on Forest Service lands in the name of protecting endangered species, such as the northern spotted owl. The loss of logging revenue drastically affected those counties who had relied on the funding. In 1993, Congress took steps to provide an alternative annual safety net funding for counties most affected by loss of timber revenue. In 2000, the Secure Rural Schools Act was passed to provide a permanent alternative funding source for ongoing loss of lumber revenue for all affected counties nationwide. But funding has barely passed for renewal, and the amount has been cut by 5% per year, resulting in a local revenue drop of up to 85% in some cases. The act expired in 2014 and was renewed for 2 years in 2015. That extension has now expired, and there has been no talk of what to do next. This could be devastating to counties who would much rather have revenue derived from the forest and the jobs that go with it.
Let me give you a good example of what life is like for us in Garfield County as a commissioner. We can run that county for 16 days from property tax revenue. Counties back east rely 100% on property tax revenue. So we rely on federal intergovernmental revenue. And we don't like that. That's just the reality. That's the hand I've been dealt when I go to do a budget.
Now, with the SRS funding in the air again, Garfield County and others are left wondering if they will have the money to keep school doors open this fall. For the County Seat, I'm Joe Davis.
We are going to take a break. When we come back, we'll pick up our conversation with our panelists about the current status and the problems facing Secure Rural Schools. We'll be right back.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
Look south to adventure. Look south to beauty. Look south to San Juan County. Out here, the road goes on forever, and what you'll find will change how you see the world. Climb on your OHV and discover forgotten landscapes and vistas that challenge the imagination. From Blanding and Monticello to the cliff faces of Monument Valley, we're open and ready for you to explore. San Juan County, Utah's Canyon Country.
The Utah Farm Bureau began as a collection of farmers supporting each other to raise the food we enjoy. Today, Farm Bureau membership encompasses everyone, whether ranchers, growers, or just everyday folks like you and me. Members enjoy discounts on items like vehicles and ATVs, or insurance that's very affordable. You don't have to be a farmer to join, and dues are small, but together we make a big difference in keeping our food supply local and abundant. Join Utah Farm Bureau.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking today about the secure rural schools as opposed to a supplemental restraint or an airbag. I see SRS every time I turn the car on, but understanding this is a lot more important. Joining us for our conversation, Carrie Gibson, Commissioner from Weber County.
Good to be here.
Leland Pollock, Commissioner from Garfield County, and we've got Mark Whitney, Commissioner from Beaver County. My first question, Carrie, where's your cowboy hat?
You know, I've got custody of the cowboy hats today. I don't think the viewers could handle all three of us. So I tried to bring some sense to the argument. But I do have one.
I know, I've seen it. It's a good looking hat.
I do have one.
I suppose the first question, we've now followed the path of SRS from its inception up to the point where we now are unfunded. And so what kind of impact is this going to have starting this year? Because you guys don't really have anything in place. This is even further than the stopgap in 2014, isn't it? You're further down the road being without funds?
This is the first year, yes. Absolutely. And it's put us in a budget crunch already. Garfield County stands to lose about $1 million a year, so it's a crisis for us.
And if you don't mind, Chad, I'd like to lead right in to letting and educating the folks into how SRS is tied to those counties like mine that is a PILT county, which is payment in lieu of taxes, because we don't have a lot of forest harvesting in our county, never have. We have a lot of public BLM lands, not a lot of Forest Service lands. So if SRS sunsets, which it has, it is effectively, as Leland just said, has not been funded for 2017. And so if it's not, then what they do in order to make those counties in the Northwest and all these counties like Garfield County that is heavily Forest Service, they divide the pot up among PILT, which in my county is going to be a 40% reduction in PILT, which is over $500,000.
Does that affect urban counties as well?
You know, that's interesting, Chad, because while we are not heavily dependent upon PILT or SRS, we do receive some. We do have some Forest Service land. But what I would focus on is the fact that the reality is when we, as a county, struggle, all of the state struggles with our economy. When I look at these counties in southern Utah, and especially the public lands counties, it is a little bit hard for me to educate my constituents as to why that really matters. But it really, really does, because when one of us fails, we all fail with our economy. And that's why I may be sitting here without the cowboy hat, even though I'm a cowboy at heart, a cow milker, whatever you want to call it. The reality is my constituents do have something to lose when Beaver County and Garfield County have to close down schools, cannot function in their economy, have to cut back dramatically on their public services that they provide to tourism, to recreation, and all those things that are so critical to my constituents. We are a public land state, and if there's one thing that I have learned from my association with the Utah Association of Counties and the National Association of Counties is that if we don't stick together, we will swing apart, because sometimes we are tempted to hunker down into our own individual niches. It doesn't work here. We have got a small congressional delegation. We have only got 6 back there, and there's an awful lot of them. And if we are not unified with our delegation, with our counties, with our governor's office, with all of our elected officials, we will get run over, and every single one of us is going to feel those tire tracks across our foreheads as we do that.
If you're following, you know, on SRS, how much of a reduction have you seen in where you were when you started and where you were last year?
Well, it's been cut 5% since the year 2000 each year. So you can do the math and see 5% across the board. We actually, because it's a formula like any other formula, have been cut pretty much in half from the inception of SRS. So it's already been cut 50% to Garfield County. Even if it's reauthorized for 2017 under an emergency funding bill that we hope Orrin Hatch is successful with acquiring, then we're going to be at a 50% cut even if we get that.
Okay, well, we'll take a pause right there. We'll come back. We'll talk more about this on the county seat. We'll be back after this commercial break.
There is a place where looking out means looking in, where an impression lasting only a few seconds will be imprinted on a life forever, where courage is forged and innocence rediscovered, where remembering is rewarding and forgetting unforgettable. There is a place where truth is felt and where seeing is believing. There is a place.
It's one more, here we go again. I tell myself I'm not enough, but one more time is not enough. One last kiss and then you were gone, and I'm here wishing you could stay a little longer. Stay a little longer. Wishing you could stay a little longer.
The Layton Hills Mall offers more than just shopping. Bring the whole family and enjoy SeaQuest Interactive Aquarium to feed the fish and exotic birds, hold live reptiles, and even swim with the stingrays. Or pump up the action and visit Dartside, Utah's premier soft foam dart tag arena. And don't forget the Great Room Escape, where you can challenge your friends to solving mysteries inside themed rooms. So come and experience great fun at the Layton Hills Mall and visit playindavis.com for other great activities.
All local products have a story of magical places, real people, and delicious recipes spanning generations. So go ahead and discover flavors you've never tasted and friends you never knew you had. Utah's own Discover Local Food.
Welcome back to the county seat. We're talking about Secure Rural Schools, SRS, a funding mechanism that's helped forest-dependent counties across primarily the western states, Northwest, and quite a bit here in Utah to offset the losses from revenues that used to be generated from timber sales. So we talk about a funding cut of 50%, and that just sounds like a percentage. And you know, the guys say, "Well, I got $2 in my pocket, and I'm at 50%. I got $1 in my pocket." Give me some numbers. Where did this thing start at, and where is it now as far as actual numbers, so people get a scope of how much money is being pulled back from the West?
Well, it started out, I think, around $450 million, give or take, in the year 2000. Now, if it's reauthorized, it'll be $240. So that gives you an idea of the cut. Now, the big cut to the western United States is the loss of sawmills. It's the loss of multiple use on forest lands. That's been taken away from us. Everybody knows that. In my county alone, our sawmill, when we lost Kaibab, was 400 jobs. When we lost the sawmill in Escalante, that was 100 jobs.
Okay, so let's put this into perspective. Population of Garfield County?
Oh, about 5,000.
And 500 jobs. So you lost 10% of your employable base. What would happen in Weber County if you lost 10% of your...
It's impossible, and that's what people don't understand. I've heard the term Western welfare, and it burns me, because here what's happened is the federal government has ripped the economy right out of the heart of these counties and torn it to pieces. And then they are kind enough to come back and say, well, we'll make up for some of it, a small fraction, a small portion, through this SRS and PILT, and SRS in this particular case. And it doesn't solve the problem. What really needs to happen is active forest management and the multiple use that Commissioner Pollack talks about. That's what really needs to happen to make these economies function, and frankly, to protect the forest and protect the watersheds of these counties and these systems. But until that day happens, and frankly, we're hopeful, aren't we, that it's coming. We're hopeful that it's coming. I'm grateful for Congressman Bishop and his efforts to bird dog and say, we are going to advocate for active forest management, and we're going to make that our goal. But until that day happens, we have to have this safety net for these economies to function, because as you said, Chad, my county couldn't handle that. My county could not survive a loss in 10% of our jobs in in any stretch of the
And
imagination.
these are household sustaining jobs.
Absolutely.
These are household sustaining jobs. They're jobs that not only sustain households but entire communities.
And they put school children in our schools. Let's not forget, Escalante School 7th through 12th grade in 1996 had about 150 children. 7th through 12th grade, now we have about 55 children. So not only did the jobs go, the kids went with the jobs.
And with the kids comes a whole other series of economic activity as well. So I know that I have some numbers for the Northern California, Oregon, Washington district. In 1983, which was at the peak of active forest management and the timbering industry, they pulled out 1.1 billion board feet of timber every year. And within a decade, by 1994, mostly due to environmental actions and endangered species actions, they were now producing at 211 million. So that's a huge cut. And the counties, you used to survive, you forest counties, on a percentage of the royalties that they paid to harvest the wood. Because everybody says, oh, well, they're not foresters that own their land, but they pay an excise tax to remove timber from public lands. Is that correct?
Yeah, and you also had the jobs. You had the 25%, but you had the jobs. That's what we had to have at the time, was the jobs. That's what's so important. Let me add to what you say. That's good that you have those figures. Now you have 10 million acres that burn because of catastrophic fires, because they closed the sawmills. And I don't care what anybody says about global warming, it was the fact that they closed the sawmills. That's why you have these catastrophic fires. So it's costing the Forest Service now, I believe Tom Tidwell, who is the national director, he will tell you about 65% of his budget just to fight these fires. I mean, this is insanity. This is bankrupting the Forest Service because they won't harvest trees.
So basically, because of protecting different species and no longer engaging in active forest management,
that burn up in catastrophic fires.
That burn up. But I think that the Utah State Forester said the healthiest forest is about 60 conifers per acre. And that we have areas in Utah that have grown to 300 conifers per acre.
There's some that's even 600 to 700 from what I've understood. And that is part of it, you know, and to go back to what Leland was saying just a minute ago, when you start talking the healthy forest initiatives, I mean, they marry one another. When you're burning up 10 million acres of land and taking that kind of a resource away to where it could be rewarded and reaped, of the economies in these local places, plus the money they spent to put out these catastrophic wildfires. Imagine the money that would be made back on putting these counties with that 25% plus the jobs in those counties.
So in 1983, when we reached our peak harvests, sustainable harvests is what I should say, because they weren't clear cutting at that point anymore. There was money being, you guys were receiving your millions of dollars as 25% of the fees that the federal government was making, actually putting money into the U.S. Treasury for other uses. Well, and now it's just a burden of cost.
Absolutely, but not just the cost. In 1983, we had healthy forests. And we didn't do the clear cutting, we did the selective cutting, okay? Let's make that clear. We had healthy forests, they managed it correctly. And when you had Kaibab from the private sector going out and weeding the forest for the Forest Service, the private sector was footing the bill, which is the way it should be.
And then they were paying royalties to boot.
Absolutely.
So they were doing the work and paying money instead of
providing a healthy forest.
And providing a healthy forest. I believe that's where paintballs came from, isn't it? Is the selective forestry process? The Forest Service was the first ones to use it?
They'd paint the trees. They didn't clear cut that. That's all the enviros, these tree huggers from hell, as far as I'm concerned. If I can say that on the air.
I'm going to get email on that one.
Yeah,
I want you to know.
They
I'm going to get email on that.
No matter what anybody says, they shut that industry down. And now they're trying to act like it's global warming that's causing these catastrophic fires. It's from their action. They created an environmental catastrophe, so they're not environmentalists.
How many catastrophic fires have you had in your term in office in Garfield County?
Just prior to when I went in, we had one in Garfield County. So since I've been a commissioner, We've had several fires that have, you know, we've dodged a catastrophic fire. Now let's be real about a catastrophic fire. They're the ones that you see on TV where they burn through homes. They incinerate everything and turn the soil into useless powder.
Wasn't part of the Cedar Mountain fire over near Duck Creek Village? That was
one of the fires. I mean, we've had fires, yes, but catastrophic grade fires we haven't had, thank goodness. But we've got our fingers crossed.
Well, and again, that's a two-part conversion on that too. Whether you talk about catastrophic, you know, being loss of lives, homes, whatever. To me, yeah, that's the extreme, and it's something we don't ever want to see. But it's also a catastrophe when you lose millions and millions of acres of precious land and precious timbers that have a monetary value and a big economy feature.
So let me go back to this. If you have a catastrophic fire, then you've got a reseeding process that goes, and doesn't the county have to bear some of that cost?
Well, not only that, you have catastrophic floods that go right along with it.
It's a watershed issue all the way around.
You know, the soil floods away. There's all kinds of problems that this has created.
Wow. Okay, well, that gives us a little bit to ponder as we take a break. We'll be back with our final thoughts on SRS and its current situation. We're going to ask what we need to be doing right now to get this refunded, and I'm going to ask you what utopia would be. We'll be back on the county seat in just a minute.
149 million years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
If you're looking for gold at the end of the rainbow, you'll probably be disappointed, because in Piute County, the only thing you'll find at the end of a rainy day is the promise of adventure. Highway 89 is your access point through Marysville and the historic trails of Bouillon Canyon. Find yourself in the mountains one minute and the desert the next as you follow in the footsteps of the pioneers. Whitewater raft, fish, hike, all within a few minutes of a comfortable bed and a warm meal. Find out why the world has made Piute County its off-road destination. Piute County, the place where the rainbow ends.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking about secure rural schools funding for the forest-producing counties in the state. I do want to go back and just kind of pick up a few details before we end our program today. And one of them is to try and put a real face on what this costs. What happens when that funding goes away? Because it sounds like, okay, well, the schools don't get as much funding, and maybe they can get it from somewhere else. What other impacts does it have on a county?
Well, you know, let me kind of put it in a full perspective. Beaver County, for example, we've got a 13% private tax base, 87% public lands. My neighbor here, my good friend Commissioner Pollock, 97%. That means only 3% is taxable to the citizens. If these funds go away because our federal governor, our federal partners are unwilling to step up to the plate and pay taxes on their lands that they so eloquently own, just like you and I and every one of us sitting at this table with private property we have to pay taxes on to supply services for our citizens. What's the first thing that's going to go away? Services to our communities. services to our counties, which would be emergency, fire, police, everything, because guess what? Our folks and our taxpayers are taxed literally to death, Chad. It would be, you talk about catastrophic wildfires, this would be catastrophically, physically, to these families. We cannot go tax these folks anymore. They're taxed out.
Okay, so, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, Chad, the part that really concerns me is it is real people. The schools actually close. There is nowhere for these children to go to school. There is nothing left under that type of a thing. And the challenge we have here, and I think that the advantage, the hope that we have, is, as I talked about before, we actually do have good buy-in from our elected officials. We have a very united congressional delegation. We have our delegation in key spots throughout their assignments in Washington, D.C., on the Finance Committee, on the Natural Resources Committee, on all these key areas that, working together, they really can do this. And here's what it really means in the end. Utopia, for us, the way that it really needs to be is active forest management as soon as possible. In the meantime, we need to give these folks an ability to budget appropriately so that every year they're not up there begging for the dime to get them through the next minute. They need to be able to know what's coming in, as Mark explained here a minute ago with the situation that they have, that they don't have to go beg for it every year, and then we work our way to that forest management that I think by any measurable objective measure has been proven to be a failure. So we move forward into a way that actually works. We know the model, we just have to get there.
Okay, last question for you, Leland. If you could have your 500 jobs back and your 25%, would you rather have that than SRS?
Oh, absolutely. That's a no-brainer. And we'd have the healthy forests back. Our forests are in terrible condition. That's what people need to understand. But let's be real about this, and I'm glad these commissioners have our back on this because we're all in it together. We can't tax the good people of our counties. And we have only one choice but to cut services. You have to cut services. You have to cut somewhere. We do not want to cut services because of this issue, because of money that is owed to us.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you. I think you made a compelling argument. Thank you for watching the show and tuning in each week. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Become involved, and I might encourage you to give a little support to our congressional delegation and anybody else you know in the country, and talk about how important this issue is to the health of our national forests and to the West. Thank you for joining us on the County Seat. We'll see you next week.